What the heck is going on in Vegas? They love the Lions this week. And Chris Myers is with us today on a Tuesday, Locked On Lions.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? A good Tuesday, December 6th to you, into a Wednesday, December 7th. It is Locked On Lions right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Matt Dery with you. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day and joining us today and finding us on Twitter at Dery Speaks, at Locked On Lions on Twitter, the Matt Dery Facebook fan page, and checking us out. What's happening, everybody, on the Locked On Lions YouTube channel. Follow us each and every day, comment, etc. We appreciate you watching and checking us out. Joe Grizzlack, shout out to Joe, who's a big listener, and we appreciate him checking us out as well here on YouTube. He and his wife Stacy, great people. Coming up on the show today, yes, the great one, Chris Myers, who was on the Fox call this past Sunday with Robert Smith and Jen Hale. Chris is going to join us, tell us about his experience Sunday at Ford Field, what he saw, and what he thinks moving forward of the Detroit Lions. We'll talk to Chris momentarily. Also, got to get into what's going on in Vegas. Something is brewing at the sports books and our friends at Bet Online, and it's good news if you're a Lions fan. So we'll get into that coming up right now. I did not mention yesterday that the Lions have a new third-string quarterback. Goodbye to Mr. August, Tim Boyle. Last week signed with the Bears. How about that? Tim Boyle, gone. And so the Lions now have Josh Dobbs, ex of the Steelers and Browns, as their third quarterback currently on the practice squad. Josh Dobbs can really run. Throwing is another story. But that was a late ad over the weekend that we forgot to mention yesterday. Also, before we get to Chris Myers, I wanted to mention this about Vegas. BetOnline.ag, our good friends and our subscribers here and sponsors, had Minnesota on Sunday night a 1.5 point installed as a 1.5 point favorite against the Lions this Sunday. Lions, of course, at 5-7 in the mix for a playoff spot in the NFC. And what still sniffing or whatever the graphic said last night, sniffing around. I think that was what the graphic said on Sunday night. Minnesota's 10-2 and about to win the division. All right. They might lose to the Lions on Sunday, but eventually they're going to clinch and win this division. And they've been running away with it. They've played tremendous football. Vikings were opened as a 1.5 point favorite over the Lions on Sunday. Right now, right here, right now, on Tuesday night, the Lions are 2.5 point favorites. The line has moved 3 points in the Lions' favor from plus 1.5 to minus 2.5. That's nuts. How about that? What does that mean? I don't know, but people in Vegas know something. They always do. You see the Bad Beats Sports Center every Sunday, the segment with Scott Van Pelt and Stanford Steve, where things just hit the number, or things are so accurate with point spreads that these handicappers, they know. Sometimes you look at the number and you go, man, how is Seattle only a 3 point favorite against a bad New Orleans team or something? Or why is Buffalo only a 3 point favorite against the Lions or whatever it was? And then Buffalo wins by 3. They just know. Well, all of a sudden, heavy line movement and heavy steam. A lot of bettors putting money down on Detroit. So much so that the line has moved like that. It shows that the Lions are starting to gain some respect and earn some respect. What a sign that is, that a 10-2 team on the road against a team that they beat earlier in the year always seem to find a way to win. Vikings always seem to find a way to beat the Lions. I know last year the Lions beat them at Ford Field, but regardless, now the Lions are 2.5 point favorites. It's kind of exciting. People are hopping on the Lion bandwagon here as they are favored by 2.5 in this game on Sunday. We'll get to Luke Braun's thoughts on Thursday on the Locked On Thursday crossover. the Locked On Vikings host. We will talk to Luke coming up on Thursday. Chris Myers from Fox is coming up next. First, though, Locked On Lions brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best quality qualified candidates available? That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. I've posted on LinkedIn Jobs before. It's really quick and easy. Add your job in the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Always great to catch up with our old buddy Chris Myers from Fox. Was just in town, of course, calling the Lions and Jaguars game and a big Detroit victory. And he joins us today here on the program. What's up, Chris?
How you doing? Good to see you again.
I know, back at you. All right, I got to ask you, all right, you had audio issues. What was going on Sunday? Because I could just tell you were not pleased at points in the game. What was happening on the broadcast?
Yeah, it's funny how that and the crew was trying, they set things up, and then in the flow of the broadcast, it was cutting out, so I couldn't hear Robert talking and he couldn't hear me. We couldn't tell if it was going out on the air or not. So at times it sounded like him, even though his mouth was moving, him and I were like cutting each other off or saying the same kinds of things. And the problem was the producer, I don't think, realized there was an audio problem. So they were trying to correct it. So in between even timeouts, they're taking off the headset, they're rewiring things. So what happens is I'm missing any kind of direction from the producer, right? Who's saying, hey, we're coming out of the break, you're reading a promo, or obviously you'll go to the action. If there's a pause, if there's a timeout, we're going to, it was, when you try to, all the years in the business, right, you just try to glide through those things. But at a certain point, you want to make sure the audience, you got to clue them in on stuff. You can only cover up, for so long. And then there was a point there in the second half where it went totally out. So then we couldn't hear the producer at all. We couldn't hear the game. The natural sound of the game. But you need the headset on. So I'm thinking, is my microphone working or not? And then we have some help in the booth, but they're having trouble communicating to the truck. So I'm like, well, I guess I should just keep talking in case the audio is going through, even though we don't know it's going through. So I don't know, I watched back some copies here. I was trying to, how bad it sounded to the audience. Maybe the audio was always there. At least from the game.
No.
Yeah.
You were fine the whole game, but then I don't know if it was third quarter or what, but I could just tell. Half. And you've done so many games, and you and I have talked before. You weren't happy about it because you wanted, and I could tell. I'm like, Chris is pissed, but we couldn't tell at home.
Good. Well, that we did the right thing, and I guess the reason I had to say something on the air was to kind of let the producer know, because our talk back and all that communication was gone. So that was really the only way that he knew something was going wrong. But they eventually did correct it. So yeah, it was not so much being angry. It was kind of like, well, who do I tell that this problem is, to the point that it's gotten worse? So as long as the audience didn't miss anything, then that's the main thing. So I'll deal with that.
Biggest takeaway from Sunday for you? Obviously, before we hit record here, you're like, hey, look, we didn't expect a 40-14 game, but how impressed were you by the Lions? And did you expect that as you were kind of prepping for the game and having your conversations with the team on Saturday?
Yeah, no, I thought they were confident. They really liked the way they've been playing and the fact that they're getting healthier on both sides of the ball. And we had their game earlier in the year, the high-scoring game with Seattle when they were in the 40s as well. So, I thought they'd win the game, but I thought it'd be a closer game. Jacksonville, for whatever the reason, and let's give the Lions some credit, because defensively they really did a job on on Trevor Lawrence and an offense in Jacksonville that's getting better with Doug Peterson. And then offensively, it was, I expected him to do well, but everything was just going so perfectly. And Goff was, and it, was said during the week, and then we reiterated asking different people about playing his, and I covered him a lot with the Rams and his Super Bowl run and that team. And I tried to ask him, hey, you're playing, he said, his best football of his career. I mean, this guy's 28 years old. It was his 100th start, including playoffs on Sunday. And I tried to get him, was it the system, back, because it was kind of like run out, even though he did well, wrong term there, but the Rams were like, hey, we got a chance to get Stafford. And they got their Super Bowl, but the Lions did really well with the draft picks and the fact that Goff has improved as a quarterback, I think, in so many areas. But anyway, he was very, and he always takes the high road. It wasn't about any system, but he really appreciates the work with Ben, the offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, and then obviously Dan Campbell being supportive of him. So I was kind of wowed by that. I know he was playing good football, but the way he distributes the ball, and obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown, we've seen him before get better and better, having Chark healthy, and even Jameson Williams appearing. And then the run game is there with the offensive line. So it was, and we noted how the defense has made, small increments of improvement and they have to make a lot more if they're going to make a playoff run. But this offense, I got to tell you, I've done some Viking games, some Eagle games. It's as good as any offense that we've seen this year.
How about that?
Yeah.
Chris Myers with us from Fox, of course, was on the play-by-play this past Sunday of the Lions win over the Jaguars. Jay Glazer on the pregame on Sunday said, Jameson Williams is not going to play much, and he'll be the gunner on the punt team. Did they tell you that on Saturday? Did you know that? Or
no? When we talked to the team, actually, the home team, which in this case the Lions, we saw that we talked to Goff Thursday, and then Friday. Dan Campbell, he was a little bit, hey, we hope Okwara is getting better, but he may not be active. Even if James, he's close. Originally, we had Williams, Jameson said as a Viking. That was the return game we targeted when we drafted him and looked at everything. But he said even if he gets in, we'll have to find out Sunday morning, see how the work. It'll be good to just get him out there and have him run around a little. So that's kind of what we were left with. Just I think just wanting to get him on the field, and then I was happy to see that he was at least active.
Yeah, no question about it. The defense is playing so much better. You talked a lot about the offense. What's Aaron Glenn doing that's different, and what insight, what did maybe Robert say to you as you guys were sitting there and watching a bunch of 3-and-outs? I mean, you got no stops when the Lions played the Seahawks earlier in the year.
Yeah, I know it's the other way around. Well, I mean, one guy doesn't solve it, but moving on from Aubrey Pleasant, I think Dan Campbell. Just like if you go back a year, Matt, when he took over the offensive play calling, remember when he had to do that, and then he brought in Ben later in the year. But I thought defensively he got a little more involved. He pointed to the New England game, tweaking some things. He didn't want to take away from what Aaron Glenn's been doing, but I think Campbell really, he said he's been spending more time with the defense, and again the offense is in pretty good shape at this moment. So other than guys being healthy, certain guys stepping up, rookies who are playing but now getting more game experience, whether it's a Kirby Joseph or a Hutchinson, James Houston, that first appearance, and then having just the depth there. Those were some things I noticed, and maybe I didn't look at the numbers coming out of that, but the less blitzing, or at least maybe blitzing more wisely is you just can't go crazy with some other teams around the league. The Giants, the Cardinals, those defenses do it, and they live by that. Sometimes they get burned by that. Depends on how the rest of your team is doing too. The complementary football, and maybe that's where Dan and Aaron Glenn, got things together to work the most part. But that's just my general overview. What Robert and I talked about, we made that point that going into that game, they'd given up 28 points a game on average, but in the last 4 games it was only 21 points, and they brought that down even a little bit more after what they did to Jacksonville.
You're not used to calling Lion blowouts, Chris. I mean, that is like,
Yeah, you're right about that.
You don't really prep for that, do you?
No, but we do. I have a theory, and people say you're biased or you're this. I hope as a broadcaster, you want a good game. They tease me because they have flights out of town. I always want overtime. I'm like, I'm willing to stay overnight if we have to, because that means it's a competitive game and both fans and teams are engaged. But if there is going to be a blowout, you always enjoy when it's the home team doing it, because the Lion fans, and I watched the Thanksgiving game, obviously, like a lot of other people, and saw that crowd and reaction in a game. Boy, they've had so just like the Viking game earlier in the year, even that Seattle game. These games the Lions could have won. Those are the games, by the way, that Vikings are winning, which is why they have the record they have. But the crowd was there. It was supportive. So if there's going to be a blowout, as a broadcaster, at least you have fans enjoying themselves, a great atmosphere, and that certainly was the case on Sunday. And that reminds me that the numbers, we put up a graphic of the touchdown passes that Jared Goff has the most touchdown passes at home of any NFL quarterback this season, and that's saying a lot. I mean, that's the good news. The other challenge of that is he's going to have to be a little better on the road, but it says something about the kind of offense and the way that they're operating beyond the fact that he's playing well.
Great. Chris Myers with us from Fox. I want to ask him about the Lions and playoffs, and we'll do more coming up next. Locked on Lions Today, brought to you by our friends at Audible. They're releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. That's why you'll be able to find a sneak peek of Block Forever, which is available on Locked on NFL right now. Block Forever, a brand new podcast from former NFL All-Pro Ryan Khalil and Audible. Khalil takes conversation about football to the next level. He gives football fans an insider's look at the game through the eyes of one of the greatest players and personalities of all time. Khalil talks to guys like Christian McCaffrey, Juju Smith-Schuster, and others. It's available for free on Audible or wherever you get your podcasts. Head over to Locked On NFL for a sneak peek of Block Forever, or catch the full series, available anywhere you get your podcasts. Available anywhere now. Audible, get in the game. Chris Myers is with us from Fox. Was on the call of the Lions and Jags. Who do you have this week, by the way, Chris?
Coming up, this is an off week. We had something scheduled. I have the Broncos, I think, coming up. We do have the Lions. I think we're going to do the Lions game. It's not official, on Christmas Eve in Carolina. I think that's on the Fox schedule, a game that we may get to do. So I'm watching closely in terms of their playoff possibilities as a wild card.
When do you get the schedule in terms of how it works?
Well, years ago, I mean, in the past, it would come out, you'd be 4 weeks ahead, a type of thing. Now, and with flexing and the Thursday night Amazon, which was Fox in previous years, the games are in terms of what's available. Sometimes we don't get that until sometimes we're just a week ahead, or maybe 2 weeks ahead, and then waiting on a possible flex or time adjustment when you get near the holiday, around Christmas, and there's the travel's a little bit of a challenge. So it's a couple of weeks ahead right now. I guess that's where we're running at.
So you've seen all these other teams. You've seen the Giants and the Commanders, and certainly the Lions now. Do you think Detroit has a shot to be one of these last wild cards with the way this weak NFC is? I mean, we saw last night's Monday night game. I mean, one of those teams in the South is going to win that division, and those aren't good football teams.
Yeah, only one of them, right, because of that division. I know people are talking about, hey, maybe 3 from the East. I wouldn't be so sure about that, because they're playing each other, and you just saw Washington and the Giants have to play each other again very, very shortly. So I think the Lions, and I'm not just saying this because I've done a few of their games. I did Seattle games earlier in the year when people thought they were going to have a down year. And by the way, that's the other great thing about the Lions situation. They can keep winning, and they have their own draft pick, but that Ram draft pick, the fact that the value of that keeps going up, which none of us would have seen, is such a great situation for the Lions to be in. So I think what you're going to see, the 49ers quarterback situation changes things a little bit with the injury to Garoppolo, and he's out for the year, but they have an excellent defense and a strong running game. So I still expect them to be a playoff team. Seattle could be in the mix. And then, so you say, 2 from the East, where's the other ones? It's not coming from the South. So the Lions, I think they control. If they win out, I think they're in. I mean, and it's if you look at their schedule with Carolina, mentioned the Vikings. They'll have a tough game with the Jets because, again, it's a road game, and I believe it's Chicago to close. So yes, they're on the path. They have to play this same kind of consistent offense again, where Goff doesn't turn it over and Jamal Williams doesn't fumble, which has been a recent issue or concern, and the defense continuing to improve. So I see them in a realistic wild card chase here, depending upon what the other teams do. But again, a lot of them, San Francisco and Seattle, play each other, so there's a lot of that type. Now, obviously that Seattle game, if they end up in a tiebreaker with that would work against them because of the game they had earlier in the year with them.
Chris, what about this game Sunday? I know you're not calling the game, but Lions and Vikings, you've seen Minnesota. They won so many close games, but yet it opened as the Vikings a 1.5-point favorite. I was talking about this before you came on. Lions are now 2.5-point favorites. What's going on?
Yeah, I think people are looking at that offense, and by the way, it's a year where passing attempts are down, scoring is really down across the NFL. I mean, the high numbers that we were used to seeing escalating. This maybe some of the lowest league scoring across maybe in a decade or so. Teams are running more, defenses are adjusting more, especially you see it in the red zone. That's an area, by the way, the Lions have been very effective offensively is in the red zone. So, maybe watching them on Thanksgiving and watching the way Goff is playing. And if you did go back, and I'm sure you watched, or Lion fans, but we didn't do that game, but I watched most of that game in preparing before with the first Viking Lions game. The Lions really had that game won. I mean, that was again another one of those where they should have won it. Vikings made the plays, Lions didn't, but it was at Minnesota. So I see this being a close game. Obviously, Cousins, you have to put pressure on him or he will chew you up. I hear defenses say that about Jared Goff, but Goff's been pretty good, elusive lately in getting the ball to the right people and having a lot of choices there to go with it. Jefferson just he's going to get his catches, just don't let him smoke you to the point. And I don't know that the Viking running game is as powerful or as much of a factor, I should say, as it has been in recent years. I think they're still a pass happy team. Minnesota's defense, they do put good pressure on. They're getting better. They're that kind of give you some room, keep you out of the end zone defense. So I think the Lions, that's where they match up well, because you'll give them room and they'll get in the red zone, and then they know how to be effective there with pounding with Williams or getting the ball. They're using Swift a little more wisely too, throwing to him out of the backfield, and that's something Goff said. Hey, he's our best receiver out of the backfield. We should use that more. So this is a coin flip game. I can see, it should be a pick'em game. People can invest how they want on who they think is going to win. But this is to me, it's a much better Lions team than the first meeting. And I'm not sure the Vikings are that much better. They're probably the same Viking team. They've just, handled those close games a lot better.
You've been in a lot of stadiums, my friend. Where's Ford Field rank in terms of crowd noise? And this Sunday, boy, these fans are going to be going crazy with the first place Vikings team in here.
Yeah, I know, and hopefully being a factor for the home team. I put out, having been on the field as a reporter and then in the booth calling games over the years for Fox. I put out a list there, and I've been there for playoff games, Matt, which matters too. Yeah. Not as much in Kansas City, but certainly New Orleans, Minnesota. Seattle probably still, it's an outdoor stadium, would be the first one on my list in terms of crowd noise, home team, home crowd having an effect. And then New Orleans, Minnesota, Kansas City could all blend depending upon maybe the opponent or the situation. I will say, from a broadcast standpoint, I love Ford Field. The press box, or at least the broadcast booth where we see the field, is very good in terms of, that's always the most important thing, to have great vision to the field. The accommodations there are nice, and the crowd, they've always been very nice to us coming in and out and that type of thing. So hopefully, for the sake of the Lions, they can create. I've heard for years, can they do that? Can they create that kind of noise that does become a factor? And I think the fans should do their part. I've heard it loud. I don't know how loud it'll be, but this is in a sense a playoff game. And that was the other thing, Matt. It was interesting to just hear even Dan Campbell bring it up, and some of the players in a careful way. The term, they're hiding playoff talk, but it's meaningful games in December. Well, every game is meaningful, but meaningful in relation to the postseason, I think. And so the guys are feeling that. And even Anzalone, I think I mentioned the broadcast, he said, this is new water for a lot of guys that was there with the Saints, and we have to handle things differently. And he was saying how important it was to bounce back after that loss to Buffalo in a game that, they were at home, thought they could, and they did, against a Jacksonville team that was coming off their biggest win. So now comes the next test. I mean, that's how it goes. They have little margin for error because of what's happened earlier in the year, but I see they're a team that can win out and be in the playoffs. That's realistic. That's not just, hope, but they have to play the way they played on Sunday.
Chris, great to see you and hear from you. Appreciate you taking a few minutes today.
Yeah, I always enjoy talking. Hey, it's good that the audio worked. I didn't have
There were no technical difficulties today.
Yes, that's good. All right, well, enjoy the rest of the season. All right, we'll talk. Have a good holiday, too, if I don't talk to you.
You got it. There he is, Chris Myers with us from Fox on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Lions. Back again tomorrow on the crossover on Thursday.